my pumpkins, or it's not sizing? Well, probably the seed germinated in temperatures below 65 to 70 degrees, or the plants were really stunted. And it's also a variety type of a situation also. So I want to start out with raised beds. And what are raised beds? Well, soil is mounted so that it's higher in the rows. Very simple. You can use deep furrows in between, and I'm going to show you some simple ways to actually do this here. And the top of the beds, they vary from 10 to 56 inches is typical. However, I will say that once they get much over 24 to 36, you have the same problem as working on the flat, in that water can puddle on top and that type of stuff. So unless you're in a drier area, that we try to keep it down to about 36, no more than 40 on top. Vary in height, 3 to 10 inches. Here's just some shots of a simple bed here on the left, where somebody has actually brought in some dirt or compost, maybe tilled it underneath and brought it in. And actually that bed's going to do a lot of good through the season, and we'll talk about that here. Because basically the first 3 inches of a bed is probably going to give you at least 70% of the benefits. And as we go up higher, we have more benefits, but the percentage of benefits really isn't all that super great at that first 3 inches. Here we look at old technology, and if you go back in the archives to the Aztec Indians many years ago, they were actually practicing this here. And the literature will basically tell us, or history will tell us, they did some very interesting things here. They would dig soil up when the rivers and that were low, and putting them on floating beds, plant their crops in there, and actually go out with the canoe and harvest them. Quite an interesting concept they had, but so we're not the first ones using beds in our great world today. The biggest thing here, and you can disregard the plastic and just kind of look at the bed, but it increases the topsoil up to 2 times or more. And in Minnesota, there's a lot of areas that doesn't have that good or that deep of a topsoil. But also, just think of the fact that you're actually up to doubling the amount of nutrients, or that plant is going to be put in this bed here. So you can actually just get a lot more growth, healthier plants, and a lot better crop here by using these beds here. We also have to remember that the roots will then have another 4 to 6 inches of soil, depending on how high you made your beds, so that they can actually go down a lot deeper and actually get a lot more nutrients here. So the other major thing that we really have, why raised beds have caught on so much in certain areas of Minnesota, is improved drainage. We have heavy soils, wet seasons, and you can basically see here, where the water would basically go. And it goes a lot farther than that in parts of the country in Minnesota. People actually use flood irrigation if they're gardeners that have a nice slope, where they'll actually just take a water source and actually flood these here and irrigate that way, which is quite a simple thing to do. Here you can kind of see here the water levels here. We'll go up a little bit in the raised beds. And again, when we get a lot of water, you can kind of see where this is basically saturated, and we realize that roots have to have oxygen or they're going to die or stunt the plant. And here, it'll be above the water level here, of course, and we'll still have some some good growth. I think one of the key things that people actually use it for is faster soil heating in the spring. More of the root zone surface is exposed to the sun, and of course the dry soil warms faster here. And in a lot of cases, you can actually plant early season crops as much as 10 days earlier here by allowing this top to actually dry out with a little bit of sunlight. So faster soil heating is a big thing, and that actually leads to a higher yield and a much earlier yield than basically planting on the flats. This was a study on my right of raspberries that were actually done, actually in Ithaca, New York at Cornell. They wanted to compare planting on the flats versus planting on raised beds. And this was kind of a heavy soil, grant that, but on the flat soil, they got somewhere around 1,200 pounds, maybe 1,300 pounds of raspberries per acre. On a raised bed, they were up maybe 4,100 pounds of raspberries an acre. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that here outside of the drainage. We know raspberries and many other plants, if their roots are continually wet or they're continually wet during the winter time, there's problems there with all kinds of array of root diseases that may not actually kill the plant, but will actually go ahead and just really stunt it and slow it down. And some of these here slowing downs are actually the metabolism of the plant actually slows down. There's a lot of things that maybe you or I just can't see by walking through the field that can actually cause that reduction here. And I mean, the same is I've seen with tomatoes and especially peppers, very sensitive to root diseases, and especially vine crops, melons, very, very susceptible to different root diseases. So, you know, that's some of your major advantages. Disease control is a major thing. We know that the majority of our diseases are basically caused by wet conditions. Almost all the fungal diseases, you may pick up some diseases granted from seeds or maybe from plants that were shipped in. But in reality, the development of that disease still depends on excess wet. And what the bed will actually do is increase the airflow at the base of the plant, and it removes the excess moisture from the plants, you know, as soon as possible. So, you know, we kind of look at disease control as a major problem, and okay. So there are some of the advantages of raised beds, and the nice thing about them is they're actually free. It will take some work to make them, but I don't think it's anywhere near as difficult as a lot of people think here. So, I mean, I think the first thing you really want to look at with raised beds is till the soil and make it loose and fluffy, because you're going to actually go ahead and bed that soil, and if it isn't, it's going to be awful hard to do, and there's going to be clumps involved. So we move the soil from the flat or the furrows, depending on what machine you do, and we actually move it to the beds. And then we flatten around the beds. And there's an awful lot of discussion out there of, you know, what should the top of the bed look like? Well, let's go back to the point that you're going to get the majority of your increase in benefits from the fact that your bed is, you know, 2 to 6 inches high. That's what's going to give it to you. But then we look at the top and we say, okay, what type of top should we have? Well, do we want to have a flat top or an indented top? Well, a lot of people who use raised beds don't use plastic, and we'll get into plastic here in a little while. But so basically, they kind of want the water to go in, so they'll actually run what we call an indented bed, where the middle of the bed where the plant is actually, you know, deeper or indented, so the water rolls in there. Some people who are on heavy soil maybe want it to the opposite. They're going to crown that bed. And I mean, this isn't, you know, super rocket science. It isn't something that's got to be done, but just give you some of the ideas, especially if you're a commercial grower, then you maybe want to think about that a little bit more. So here's just a simple V-plow that's actually been put on a rototiller, and we have a gal there raking the top of it. Again, very, very simple way to actually go. And you can actually make these beds in the fall. A lot of the commercial growers actually do that, especially if you're on a heavier soil. So that soil would be ready to go in the spring before you could actually go in there and work it. The top of the bed will be ready to plant. Maybe the rest of the garden really won't be. So, you know, that's kind of one of the keys is a nice soil. So next question we look at is how are raised beds used? You know, the planting scheme is just all over the board here. Again, the bottom line is you're not going to get your benefit from the planting scheme so much as you are the fact that your bed is up there, you know, probably an average of 4 inches over the time. But you know, some of us look at you know, a narrow bed with 2 rows on there, you know, and that's fine. And onions on beds are becoming a very, very popular thing, and there we'll put the onions somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 to 6 inches apart with on a narrow bed, 2 rows here. If you go to a wider bed, like 3 foot here, basically then you're up at, you know, you can put more rows on here. 5-foot beds make me awful nervous unless you're inside of a high tunnel or you've got a perfect shape on there to be able to get the water off of them beds. Because what you end up is it's as flat here as the field for water. So you just want to, you know, to kind of think about that. When you plant on beds, you want to make sure, just like on flat ground, is that you utilize it. So we look at, you know, going ahead with staggering plants here. You can see there's a couple of plants here, and they're actually staggered, you know, there. So, you know, the root system, even though with the added soil, is still deep, and we're still going to get, you know, better yields and that type of thing too. So something to think about here. Just a few shots of some raised beds. Again, some of the commercial people are probably looking at something a little bit different than this, but a lot of home gardeners, you can go very, very simple. It's just raising the soil. One of the advantages basically here is, you know, you're out of the lawn here. I mean, you're controlling just this amount of soil here. That's actually, I'm giving you some real benefits here. There's just another one here. I'll make a couple of comments on this one here. You know, the wood you buy, you want to make sure that it's either not treated or treated with a common product like mineral oil or linseed oil or something like that. I checked with the lumberyard, and there still is some arsenic wood floating around, and you don't want to use that. We did a lot of research with that back 10, 12 years ago, and we found out that if the plant's got to be planted at least 1 foot from the edge to you know, 14 inches before the roots actually won't pick up that much arsenic or what other products are in there. So just something to think about here as you look at you know, your selection of woods. Again, that's on the ground. These are actually in a high tunnel, and we kind of designed this tunnel actually in Bemidji at the Boys and Girls Club for use with a wheelchair. And so basically this was in the fall. They basically got to be refilled again. But the idea is they're nice and high so that you could actually utilize this out, the same idea outside, and plant your crops in there. This is a cattle bunk feeder, which is a good outside bed. This is a real heavy one here. I know at our local lumber yard here, they make a lot of these. They're made up, you can buy different grades. like I say, this one's a real heavy one that you can pull around, and you may or may not want that. But they actually make them quite a bit higher, so that you can raise most of your crops with very, very little bedding and pardon me, bending, and kind of go from there. So let's just think about that. I mean, the thing is, you can buy these reasonable. I think they're roughly 4 foot by 16 foot at our local lumber yard, and I think they're between $150 and $200. They don't have that heavy thing on the bottom, and they're more on stakes, but they're 4x4s going across. But very, very economical and very, very high. It's really great for a lot of crops like lettuces, radishes, flowers, that type of thing. If you're going to grow tomatoes or something in there, you're probably going to want a little bit more dirt. So basically, what kind of tools can we use to make that bed? I know the commercial growers have a big selection of bedders ranging from $1,200 on up. There's several suppliers of them. They're relatively easy to make, and take a relatively small tractor to make beds, unless you're really looking at something like a 3 or 4 row bedder, which there's a few commercial growers in there. So this is just one I built here that we use on our place. It's just a plate of steel here, and I bent some angle iron. Just a couple of tips here. This is about 20 inches wide, and it makes a nice 17, 18 inch bed. You're not going to get them perfect all the time. I would actually like to have made this a little bit wider here to actually pull in a little bit more dirt. I think I have another slide. I guess not. So basically, you can actually make these out of wood. You can, basically do what you want to do. But what I'm saying is, you don't have to spend a pile of money to actually make yourself a bedder. I've seen a lot of them, like I say, out of 2x4s, 2x6s through here with a big heavy piece of plywood on top, and then they'll make a nice bed. You may have to go ahead and put some blocks on top or that. But if the ground is fluffy, it actually makes a nice bed with very, very little investment. I'm going to actually move on to plastic mulch now, and then we will continue on. So, plastic mulch has become a revolution in agriculture and gardening, especially more and more over the past 5 to 10 years here. And so what is plastic mulch? Well, crop grow through holes in a continuous strip stretched over the soil. Very, very simple. You can see these are peppers. You can see the growth. Plastic has a lot of advantages, and we'll talk about some of them here. This is just a shot of one of our research stations by Staples, when we were actually making beds, and then we actually put plastics on there. And I don't want to indicate that you have to put plastics on if you're going to use beds. You can keep adding. We're going to start with the beds. We're going to go to plastics. We're going to go to row covers. Then we're going to go to low tunnels. So you can look at any type of additions that you want to take this as far as you want to actually go with it here. So this is just a shot here of a research project that we actually did here of plastic versus non-plastic in early season production. And you can kind of look at the squash. I think this is zucchini squash on the right here in the plastic. And if you look over to the left, you can kind of see the growth of it without plastic. So you can just see the how much more heat the plastic gave, and how beneficial it really was here in this here particular planting. This is actually on some beds here with plastic. There's not really high beds, maybe 3 inches here versus there to basically planted about the same time. You can do a lot of fancy things with some different plastic. Here we had muskmelon here. I'm trying to get as early as we can in northern Minnesota, actually flowering about June 15th, which is probably you know, abnormal here, but with the right season, you know, the plastics can really help. So we're going to look at different types of plastics here. Probably black we'll start with is definitely the most common. It has some heat transfer, it's excellent weed control, and I would probably say about 80 to 90% of the plastics used in Minnesota are black. And there's several reasons for that, and we'll get into them. Then we go to clear plastic, which actually gives a lot more heat transfer. But the big problem is, unless you're using something like sweet corn, plant something like sweet corn, that you can put herbicides underneath the plastic, you have poor weed control. Most herbicides, for them that use them, aren't recommended or cleared to put under plastic. There are a few of them that are. And then we look at green IRT plastic. That's been around now for 10 years or something like that. It has good transfer. You can kind of see through it, but it gives good weed control of most weeds. Won't control thistles will grow through it or grow through all these plastics. But so we look at a difference in cost here. It gets kind of considerable. Black is the cheapest. Then we go to clear, and then we go to the green IRT, which is probably 30 to 40% more dollars, but there are advantages. Some crops here that really love a lot of heat, and I think of the vine crops especially watermelon and cantaloupe. Green IRT really helps to push them things along here. We've done research over black. We're probably looking at about 10 days here in northern and central Minnesota. So you know, think about it that way. But you're still going to be way ahead of what you can get with no plastic. Just another shot here of some crops here with plastic mulch and beds and on the flat. Now you got to remember, we're using beds and we added the plastic mulch, so we're compounding the season extension here by actually adding that. Uh-oh. Okay, I kind of froze up there for a second here, but I think we kind of got it squared away. Okay, how is plastic mulch applied? Well, there's all kinds of ways to do it. Whether you're a home gardener or whether you're a commercial grower here. But this fellow here is actually just rolling it out and applying it by hand in his garden. There's a couple of things you always got to be concerned about with plastic. And one basically is wind, which basically means the edges have got to be buried and covered with plastic, and the machines do a really good job of that, at least as a rule here. But the big thing is you want it stretched across there so that basically the plastic touches the ground and is snug to it. If you just have the plastic blowing in the wind and there's a lot of slop in the plastic, you're not really going to gain as much as you can if it's really tight. So that's kind of the idea here. Usually we bury one side here if you're doing it by hand, and then the other side here we dig a little trench, and the person actually walks alongside of it, tightens it up with his foot, and somebody else follows and goes ahead and covers it. Now, if you're on a bed and not on the plastic, it's a lot easier to lay because the plastic just goes over the bed and you throw some dirt, and it's very easy to tighten up here. But having that plastic tight is extremely important. You know, we talked about clear, we talked about black and green. We're getting into more and more colored plastics, and we'll talk a little bit about that here. A lot of the universities are working on that. But we did do a lot of research at the Grand Rapids Experiment Station back a few years ago. And the first thing that really happened is no matter what color plastic you used, if it was black, blue, red, green, yellow, or whatever, the yield was increased at least 50%. We did it on tomatoes, peppers, and melons, and that was consistent. So whatever you use, you're basically going to get a really good yield here. And this was on the flats we did it wasn't on beds, so something to really think about. Now, we talk about silver and white. That's a whole nother ball game, and I don't have any pictures of that, but white plastic is actually used in a time of the season or in areas of the country that we really want to cool the ground because it reflects the sun. So maybe people are going to plant fall broccoli, but in order to get it ripe, they got to plant it in July or something like that. They meet a market. They can actually go in with the white plastic here. And then silver is becoming a very, very popular plastic or addition to plastic, basically because we realize that it dislocates insects, and we have found some really, really good insect control using silver plastic or silver-colored plastic, especially for organic people, but even non-organic people actually are beginning to look a lot stronger at that here. And again, it just kind of looks at color. It actually bounces back. It reflects. The real key aspect is there's so many different colors that plants react to. And Penn State has done a lot with tomatoes here. I think I have that on. Okay, tomatoes, we want a red type plastic. Here's some of the research plots that we've had. The rule of thumb, the main color of the crop seems to indicate the color of the plastic. Now, there is some exceptions with that with green or blue especially, but that's it. The problem we run into is like with tomatoes, we realize that they like red plastic, but what shade of plastic do we really want? What shade of red? And that gets to be a concerned situation because Penn State has done a lot of that with a lot of different brands. And so we find out there is a difference with how thick the red plastic is and also the exact shade of it. And if you really want to be technical, also the exact variety. So will red give you more yield? Well, overall, yes. The more the plants are stressed, the better yield you're going to get. If you get a perfect growing season, probably not going to give you a tremendous yield advantage here. But we also notice that the yield comes at the end. I want to talk a little bit about the types of plastic mulch here. We talked about red, colored, infrared transmitting, which is like the red. But I want to talk a little bit about degradable plastics. For years, we worked with photodegradable plastics, which basically mean that the sun basically had to contact them, the real strong rays of the sun, and it would break them down. We played around with that for a lot of years. It was kind of popular. But the big problem is the part of the plastic that was underneath the soil, or for some reason the sun couldn't contact, basically didn't break down. There was plastics kind of blowing all over the place. Sometimes it took 3 or 4 years to really get a field cleaned up. As you worked it, the older plastic would come to the surface and basically photodegrade. And still the majority of the plastics used are non-degradable hard plastic, and there's several reasons for that, because if you're going to keep the plastic over winter, use them the next year, or you're going to perennial crop, like strawberries or something where you're using it more than 1 year, you almost have to go with the non-degradable. But in the past 10 years, and especially the past 3 or 4, we've been doing a lot of research, especially on our farm, for companies with biodegradable plastics. They started out, they were very expensive. You didn't know when and if they were going to biodegrade. Well, I guess we knew if they were biodegrade, we just didn't know when. And they're kind of a pain. But in the past, like I say, 3-5 years, they've actually gotten these down to a science. First of all, they've got their costs down, where they're just about equal to straight black plastic. It is thinner, but it still lays well. There's different grades. You can get what we call a 0.4 mil, a 0.5 mil, and a 0.6 mil. And 0.5 mil is kind of the standard, but a lot of people are going to the 0.6 mil. It lays a little bit better, and it will last the whole season. But if it's still there at the end of the season, you're just getting plowed, and by spring it's gone, just like plowing under corn or corn stalks or stubble or compost or whatever. So, that's kind of a big thing as far as we're concerned. We use a lot of it on our farm, basically for our annual crops. It really saves in labor. Paper mulch kind of really was a big thing for a while here. You can kind of see how it's breaking down here. They've tried mixing it with different oils and all that to go ahead and make it lay better and maybe last a little bit longer. And there's still quite a bit of it out there. I don't want to discourage anybody from trying it, but it's not quite as popular as some of the other ones here. And then we just kind of have our other types of plastics. How is plastic mulch used? Well, almost anything. Vegetables, cut flowers. Again, as I mentioned here, the picture of some white I just put up there. It really works well. Probably more in the southern part of the state, and southern U.S. uses a lot of it to keep the soil a lot cooler. So there's a lot of different things that you can do here. Again, I talked about the red plastic here. We've done some research with that on our Grand Rapids experiment station over the years here. Soil warming is actually similar to black. We don't have a lot of extra heat going through it. And we do get up to 25% increase in certain years, but it does depend on the season. It is quite a bit more expensive, probably close to double the cost of black here. So it's something to really think about. A lot of this is used on plants like corn. You can really push the season, and now that they have the biodegradable clear for corn, it really makes a difference. You can transplant into that and probably push the season ahead 2.5, sometimes 3 weeks, using clear plastic and transplants, and maybe adding row covers too. So what are some of the concerns that we have or challenges here? It's going to cost you something here. I would suggest, I'll have some prices up at the end, but I would suggest looking at getting a commercial roll and maybe splitting it with somebody, or just figuring it's going to last several years. So that's going to kind of conclude this thing on plastic mulch. I want to move on to row covers here, because that would be the third thing that we're actually adding on here. And row covers and low tunnels will be the next topic that we're going to cover. And what are row covers? Well, they're films or sheets that cover plants. I guess that's very, very simple. They've came a long, long way in the past 5 to 10 years. Especially the last 3 or 4, the cost of them is going down. drastically here, and I'll show you some costs here towards the end here. A lot of people call it the biggest revolution in protected gardening agriculture that there was. We started out with row covers. They were old plastic films. You know, most of them were, 3 to 6 mil. The big problem that we have with plastic is, and first of all, you can't touch the plant, so we have to actually use wire. But old plastic films, the trouble is the sun would come out and they would heat up so bad that you had to have ways to either push air in there, go ahead and pull the plastic up, otherwise it would just cook the plants. Even if a lot of days, even if it was 50, 60 degrees with a bright sun there in late April or May, they could easily heat up to 130 degrees and cook things. So a lot of people actually, they use them on a smaller basis. They actually came up with several types of plastic films for row covers that had holes in them and slits. Of course, you can see with that, they did control the heat, but we lost a lot of it. And they had a little frost control. They would give us a degree or two, but not a lot. So the new row covers here, we'll see quite a bit of pictures of them. They're very, very light. They'll weigh a half an ounce to 1 ounce per square yard, and you multiply that out. You can get ones that are as big as an acre, and they don't really weigh a tremendous amount. So what's the some of the advantages? And I don't know which is more important. We kind of look at it as frost protection. You can put your plants out quite a bit earlier. This is just a shot inside here. But early and late season warms. A lot of times 10 to 20 days difference using a row cover. And pest protection, flea beetles, Asian beetles, all kinds of other insects can basically be controlled because they'll basically breathe. Sure, it gets warmer under there during the day, but they can breathe. Water can go through them, so you don't have to worry about taking them off all the time here like you do the plastics. There's two ways to apply it. One is what we call a floating, and one is called what we call a low tunnel or over the plants. There's advantages and disadvantages to most. So these here are usually supported with a number 9 wire. You can buy these here commercially for 60 cents, 70 cents a piece, or you can just go to a lumber yard and or flea farm or one of them type of stores and actually buy them, a roll and just make them yourself. So we have to realize that they don't help as much if they're not hooped. But they do provide windbreak. Hooping is desirable, but I'm going to show you why here in a minute.
Hey Terry, I have a quick question here. Someone asks, how do row covers / low tunnels affect pollination?
That's a good question here. There'll always be air going through them. So most of the crops, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the crops that we use, like peppers, tomatoes, that type of thing, are basically self-pollinated. So it's not drastic that we actually go ahead and take the row covers off, even though by that time of the year it's going to kind of be getting a little bit warmer. If you're looking at vine crops, that's where we get into a problem. You can plant some vine crops. Parthenocarpic is the fancy biological word, but basically they don't need insects to pollinate them. And the big advances with that is in cucumbers. We don't have any melons yet, but usually by the time they're blooming, hopefully we got enough heat. But that's one thing that really needs to be thought out too. So good question here. How are row covers, applied? Again, you've got your beds made. You don't have to use beds, of course. Fertilize and plant, and then we'll actually put them on. I'll show you some more pictures here. Again, 2 weeks of frost protection in the spring, more in the fall. And there is protection in there from a lot of crops, flea beetles, that type of thing. Squash bugs, cucumber beetles, corn earworm. You know, a lot of people leave them on. Right too. We do a lot of what we call flat row covers for sweet corn here. We'll actually transplant right in the ground, and we actually have row covers that will cover a third to an acre to a half an acre. And the minute the corn is basically in the ground, we go ahead and put the row cover over it, and the row cover pretty well stays there unless we have to pull it off to irrigate until you know, the corn starts to tossle, or we can see the tossle in the whirl. So a lot of organic people actually use for protection of insects. Of course, you can see that you really need it sealed quite well, but it does work really, really well. Make sure you bury the edges, like I just mentioned. Make sure you got that sealed here, because them bugs, if they get in there in that heat and moisture, they can really multiply in a hurry on you. So think about rotating your crops. Somebody asked about pollination. On crops that are highly pollinated, you can do it. If you really want to keep your row covers on for some particular reason, some people who do seed breeding and that type of stuff put on. So we actually have small bumblebee kits that you can actually put underneath them, and the bumblebees will just live under there and pollinate, and it works well for some crops. Okay, here's what I really wanted to talk about. With people asked about, you know, how high do I really need them? There's two kinds of crops out there that we look at with we can use row covers on. One is, let's take the one on the right, that's sweet corn, or things in the corn family, and basically they have their growing point down here. So if the row cover is touching the top, like I mentioned with our corn, it's just going to kind of over time grow. The leaves will actually push it up. I'm usually not touching the growing point. Then basically it'll work out okay. And I have to say, when I look at the row covers on them bigger fields, it's so beautiful. They just blow in the wind. It's quite a sight to see. But moving on here, when we look at cucumber plants and vine crops and peppers, tomatoes, the growing point, once it comes up, is usually above the leaves. So you can't have the row covers actually touching the row cover, or it's actually going to disorientate the plant. It could cut yields. They could grow crooked, but there's not going to be anything good. So depending on the type of crop that you use it on. Weeds are a big thing with row covers. You have to watch it. You've created a ideal growing condition for the crop, but you also created an ideal growing condition for the weed. So you know, if we look at plant damage, row covers, the nice thing about them is they'll last for several years, and you have to think about the weeds. This is just the cost of some of the row covers here. I looked up today here. If you're going to buy them, I would highly recommend, even if you're a gardener, that you look at getting them from a commercial supplier. Here's this is 0.5, which is probably the most common row cover. You know, it's going to give you up to 5 degrees frost protection and a lot of heat. 5 foot wide by 250 foot length is $29.30. Again, if your garden's only 50 foot long, you just cut it Not a big deal. You can get these rows up 1,000 to 3,000 feet. 1,000 is common if you're a commercial grower. If you want to go to 72 inches wide by 250, you're looking at 3465. And 50 foot by 500 foot is often common for people who are growing sweet corn. If you want another source here, Knowles Produce, you can Google them, get one of their catalogs. They're big into drip irrigation, plastics, that type of thing. Knowles has many sizes and weights of row covers, about anything you wanted, from a very small one to them that'll cover several acres. So you know, something to actually consider here. You can actually get them. There's the seed catalogs are sponsoring smaller amounts, Johnny Seed, Harris Seed, many others out there. So they're not anywhere near the cost they used to be. I can remember when a 5 foot by 250 foot cost $120, $130, and that just isn't the case anymore.
Terry, just to break in real quick, I had a question come in about those bumblebee kits. And since you're talking about costs, could you say a little bit more about where growers can find more information on those kits and roughly how much the cost is?
Yeah, there's a few companies that do it. One of the major one is Koppert. I think it's Koppert. They're actually in the Netherlands, where they do a lot of row covers and enclosed type agriculture. And I'm trying to think here, if you know, you have to call them and see what different sizes they actually have in a real small area. I know one that'll do an area that's something like 26 by 100 or 25 by 100 is something in the $30, $35 range plus shipping.
I found that Koppert website, so what I'll do is I'll share it with folks using the chat box, so that at least it's a start for looking into that technology. Yeah,
there's a fellow by the name of Paul Wolf who's just an expert with that. That's with Koppert. Actually spends a lot of time in the Netherlands and that. And there are other places out there. And just so I can mention this too, is some people are maybe interested in biological insect control, and Koppert is really up on that, along with several of the others. There's several companies in New York that just slipped my mind, and I deal with them a lot for education. But you know, biological insects and how to use biological insects, maybe another topic for another time here.
Great.
So, okay. So what are our low tunnels? Well, low tunnels are basically nothing but covering that's of substantial size. They vary a lot, depending on you know, what you're really after. Let me see here. You can use them on garden beds, or you can picture that this is still on the flat, and you can just use them. They're bigger than using row tunnels, where it just kind of covers a narrow row, because the average piece of wire that we use is somewhere around 72 inches. It can vary all over the place. There's no real science, and the row cover goes over it. This is just a picture here of, again, of using it on bed, but the heat generated in here is really a lot, and again, maybe insect control on that particular one. Here's just a shot of one outside here. You can see it was made out of PVC pipe, and actually just basically covered. And you know, the nice thing about the low tunnels, if the wind does get them on you, you just, you know, take the row cover and put it back on. It's no real big super deal. They actually used PVC pipe, and if you want to get fancy about it, I would get some rebar and just cut it into you know, like 1.5 to 2 foot pieces. Stick half of it in the ground and half of it up here. The mistake that this individual made is the fact that they're using a white PVC pipe. And white PVC pipe is very degradable in light. So my recommendation is to go ahead with a gray electrical or a gray type of PVC pipe. They're a little bit more expensive, but nothing very, nothing drastic, and you'll get a lot more years out of that. If you're going to get very big, then you're going to have to go to some steel hoops. Oops, and I think nope, I missed that one. Okay, so you have to go to some steel hoops. But low covers are becoming very, very popular, not only for commercial people, but gardeners, especially since we came up with all the fancy new strawberry varieties that you put in the spring, and start harvesting them first week in August, and at least in northern and central Minnesota, and harvesting them till into October, actually as late as the 1st November sometimes, and then go ahead and tear them up like tomatoes. So there are a lot of advances in hybrids and varieties out there that are coming together to make things popular here. You may want to think about some drip irrigation down the road, but then we won't get into that tonight here with that here. So let's kind of do a summary here of what we talked about here. Raised beds, we're going to improve drainage, warmer soil types, and a lot less compaction. Mulches, we're going to look at warmer soil types again, plastic mulches, I mean. We're going to control weeds and water efficiency. We're going to add the row covers, warmer air temperatures, a lot of frost protection in the spring and in the fall, insect protection, and again, if you're going to use them with drip irrigation or efficient water use here. Low tunnels here, the fourth aspect of economic season extension, inexpensive season extension. They're relatively cheap, and you're going to, you can take them off. You can leave them on. You can, depending on the crop, you can kind of do different things here. They're easy to make. You don't have to be no super builder or anything like that. They're usually used in the spring, but also a lot of crops are now overwintered with row covers, because we realize with a lot of our annual crops, with a lot of our perennial crops, those that you keep, it's the wind damage, the wind desiccation, the blowing of the snow, and everything that actually does the damage. If you want to take a twig and look at it in the spring under a microscope, after it went through winter outside, you'll see just a tremendous amount of micro breaks in there that actually cause a lot of problems. 10 days to 3 weeks earlier, that's been confirmed pretty well in every horticulture producing country. You can use them on all crops. Plastic or row cover. I was talking to some people in Michigan here just a couple, 3 weeks ago, I guess it was the 1st of December at their annual meeting. And a lot of the guys who are trying to get really, really early melon, they're actually using a 1 or 2 mil plastic and on hoops and putting row covers over them and getting a double warmth real early in the spring. The row covers will kind of stop the plastic from heating a lot. They're easy to take down in the fall or in the summertime and get rid of them, and you can easily rotate.
Hi, Terry. We had a question here come in from Peter asking, is row cover on sweet corn helping the soil temperature to raise for better germination?
The row cover does help a lot, but not anywhere near as much as the plastic. Most of the people that are using row covers are actually transplanting into, they're either doing one of two things. They're either transplanting into bare ground or on plastic, or if they're using row covers with just seeding, they're usually seeding into plastic. But you're still going to get a lot of advantages from row covers. I wish I would have put some of my fields of sweet corn in, because you can see how when you transplanted the sweet corn, it was low, and by the time we took it off, it was 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall. It just kind of grew up. Good question. Okay. So I think with that here, our hours is up, and we'll see if there's any questions or anybody or any comments anybody would like to make at this time.
Yeah, what I think I'll invite people to do is right next to your name on this right-hand side, there should be a red microphone. And you can go ahead and click that red microphone to unmute yourself. If anybody's having issues with that, let me know. Otherwise, I have a few questions coming in via the chat box, too, that I can jump to. So let me start with chat box question. Somebody chat me if you can't unmute yourself, just so that I can do it manually, too, but I don't want to unmute everybody all at once if they're not expecting it. So from John asks, so row covers work similarly to cold frames, but for smaller scale agriculture?
Depends on how you look at the cold frame here. We kind of look at cold frames as something with plastic or glass, which will actually generate a lot more heat, direct heat, than row covers. You know, if you're really looking at something like that, there's nothing wrong with using 2 row covers on top of each other. We've done research with that too. But basically the same thing, yes.
All right, then we've got a few other additional questions that are coming in. Any tips on clips to attach the fabric to the frame and ends?
Are you talking, I wonder if they're talking on raised beds or they're talking on structures. The row cover is very, very light. So if you're attaching it to wood on a smaller basis, most people actually just take like a 1x2 and set it right along. They're very inexpensive, and just use drill screws to go ahead and tighten it down. You may want to double it under there. Very, very simple to do. I think if you're actually, if you want my opinion, if you're actually putting it on row covers, it's best just row covers over hoops. It's just best to throw a little dirt on the sides. It's actually heavy and be able to take it off. They do have pins in that you can buy. I don't jump up and down over them, but they do work some. I hope that's enough answer. Okay.
Another question that we had come in was how expensive are machines that apply plastic mulch, and what acreage has been found to be feasible?
That's a very good question here. It depends on the width of the bed. I did price some out here. If you want the whole machine that will make a bed that's up to 20 inches wide and lay plastic and everything and drip tape, I would probably think in the neighborhood you can buy that in the neighborhood of $1,300, give or take, you know, $100. Or if you want one that will lay a 36-inch wide bed with a 4-foot piece of plastic, I just priced them out here a week ago, and they're about $1,550. You can get some attachment for them, but so you know, in there depends on what company. Some companies are very expensive, and some are quite reasonable. Again, I would take a quick look at that and hold some produce in there for some of theirs if you want a more inexpensive good machine. Otherwise, there's Mechanical Transplanter and several other companies here that actually build them too. But I would say, you know, $1,500 to $1,800 with all the attachments should get you a pretty good machine.
Great. Still got a few more questions coming in, and I did get notice from somebody that people aren't able to unmute themselves. So I will, rather than unmuting everybody, I think I'll just ask people to type your questions in the chat box so, you know, people don't get surprised unmuted. Next question that we had, one of the questions that came in was, sorry, just lost you here. As far as row covers, how long do you leave them on, and when do you initially put your row covers on?
Okay, good question here. First of all, you're going to want to put them on in the spring as soon as you transplant or seed or whatever you're going to do. So the sooner the better. That's the time of the season that it's cool, the ground is cooler, and you want to generate as much heat. Now, some people actually will put them on to warm up the soil, then go in and plant. But that is a lot of extra work to actually do that. So my answer is basically, you know, as early in the spring as we can. When do we take them off? Well, like on sweet corn, you don't want to leave them any longer than when the tassel starts coming out, because then you're kind of looking at a growing point again. So usually when I look down the whorl and I can see a tassel coming up, I kind of think it's time to take them off. But you got to remember, you're looking at quite a bit of heat by then as a rule. And then the other question is pollination, and that gets to be a you know, a situation depending on the crop and all that too. So, you know, as the season progresses and we get warmer and warmer and warmer, the benefits of them are going to be lower until in the fall when you can cover them up.
Just as a follow-up to that, somebody wanted to know what you define by when the soil is workable. What kind of soil temperature?
Well, I look at them more for planting, and it depends on the crop. If you're looking at onions and radishes and cold crops, 40 to 42 degrees low end will work. If you're looking at things like sweet corn, them type of crops here, 55 degrees, and for some of the super sweet, 60. And if you're looking at melons, pumpkins, vine crops, you like to see soil about 65 degrees.
All right, well, I've got at least just two others here that have come in. Somebody wanted to know if they can use row cover material to cover their greenhouse to keep the temperature from exceeding 130. Yep,
some people do that. You won't get quite the benefits. And the other thing you got to remember is row cover is designed to let water through. So, you know, you may have to deal with that type of a problem also with rain coming in, you know, and so but row cover will let what we call a half-ounce row cover will give you about 80 to 85% of the light will come through it. So it's not really enough to really hurt the you know, crops or anything. So
we had another person who's with the group say that aluminet is a good cover over the top of high tunnels to provide shade and reduce temperature.
It is a good product.
Okay. And speaking of design, the last question that I see here that has been answered so far, at least, is somebody asked, most row crop covers are round. What about other shapes, like making it square?
I suppose that you could do anything you really want to do. But you gotta remember that you're going to want to you know, deal with the water and the wind, and the round kind of is aerodynamic, and the wind usually will kind of go over them, you know, that way. And if you're square, you're going to have to worry about the top, so that all the water don't settle on the top. You know, it kind of pushes it down. So you need to be concerned about that. As far as the objective of heat, it really doesn't make any difference what kind of shape they are. You know, I've seen a lot of them out there.
Great. Speaking of soil temperature, how far down should that be measured? Somebody asked if we're talking surface to about 6 inches down or deeper.
No, you don't really need to go that deep. We kind of really look at the depths to with a minimum of 1 inch to 2 inches of how deep the seed is going to be planted. So basically, if you're looking at something like radishes or carrots or something, you don't put in very deep. You don't need to worry about it. And that's going to be one of the big advantages of the row cover. It's going to hold a lot of that temperature at night. The thing's reversed during the day. It heats up the soil. And then at night, when the soil is warm, it heats up the air inside the row cover. So that, you know, it doesn't cool down quite as much at night. So I mean, I wouldn't worry about no 6 inches, but you want to look at temperature down, an inch or so, or 2 inches below the seed that you're going to plant.
Perfect.
I saw a question on there about, I think I did, or did I miss about something about planting seeds through plastic mulch?
Oh yeah, I think that you're right. How? That was the question about how expensive machines are to apply plastic mulch. Well,
I have one that came up and says.
Speak to plant. Yeah, here we go. Can you talk to planting seeds through plastic mulch?
Right, and that's a very, very common practice. There are fancy machines for commercial growers to actually do that, and actually do it quite quickly. It's basically done with sweet corn, a lot with sweet corn, and a lot with vine crops. So basically, it works well. Just to make yourself a nice little hole, make sure the holes are big enough that the plants are going to come up, because the row covers will shift a little bit, and just kind of go from there. If you're not using drip tape for water, you want to make sure the holes are big enough, and the top of that bed is designed to gather the irrigation water or the rainwater too. And a lot more of our bigger growers are actually going with overhead irrigation and plastic, and getting good results.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions roll in, so if folks have a few other burning questions, be sure to get them in quickly. Otherwise, really, thank you for your time, Terry. There were a few folks that said, awesome lecture, thank you, so we'll repeat that as well.
Okay, well, you're welcome, and a good growing season to everybody.
Thank you. All right, well, everybody stay warm. Thanks for attending tonight.